Hi, I'm Monica, and today we're doing a book review on the award-winning novel We Are Not Free by Traci Chee. Now, I was drawn to this book because I just kept on seeing its cover when I was at work, but I had also heard really amazing things about the book. It had won a bunch of awards, and on the day that I was just browsing on Libby and it popped up as an available now option, I knew that I needed to listen to it. Boy, was I not disappointed. I think that honestly it's one of the best YA books that I've read so far this year. Maybe one of the best books that I've read so far this year. So who is Traci Chee? Now, Traci Chee is an award-winning author. She's written a bunch of series, a lot of historical fiction, but also fantasy, and her characters generally are East Asian-inspired characters. Now, Traci Chee, in a bunch of interviews, has talked about a lot of her influences, and one thing that I thought was really interesting when thinking about who or what literary influences she had in her writing was the characters from the X-Men series. Now, I thought this was interesting because in We Are Not Free, the aspect of found family that is so prevalent in X-Men and the series as well as the movies is the idea of found family, which is a heavy theme that's explored in We Are Not Free, as well as the idea of power and the underdog, propaganda, politics. There are just so many amazing themes that are seen in this comic universe that also are heavily influential in the politics of the 60s and 70s, which we see in Chee's novel a lot. I think that a lot of the political movements of the 60s were what was reflected in the comic books of the time as well. Now, what is We Are Not Free about? So We Are Not Free focuses on 14 young teens who are living in a mass incarceration center during World War II. This focuses on 14 Japanese American families and their journey to these centers and how mass incarceration impacts their ability to be kids and their journey in life. This book centers on the families and the relationships and the ways that life is stopped for these kids, but also how life is kind of forced to continue for these kids as well within the incarceration centers. Now, the reason why I'm saying incarceration centers is because the term internment camp is a term that is kind of contested within certain identity groups, as it's kind of seen as a pacified use of the language. So that's why I keep on saying incarceration center. What are the cons of this book? Now, I said that this was one of my best or one of my favorite reads so far of the year, so I'm not going to have a lot of cons in this review, just as a warning. But the one con that I did have with this book is there were a lot of characters. Now, I know that there is a reason why she did this. Now, the reason why she did this obviously is because this was a political event that affected countless people. And so this was a necessary tool for her to use, and I completely understand why she did this. For me as a reader, when listening to this as an audiobook, it was a little confusing. It did take me out of the book a little bit in needing to reorient myself sometimes in some of the chapters, but I will not say that it completely took me out of the story or took my enjoyment out of the story. And I also would like to reiterate again that this was a tool that was necessary. Ultimately, I thought was done very well. But I will say that if you're somebody who might get a little confused about multiple characters or plot points, this might be something that you might need to be a little bit more of an active reader with. Now, what were the pros? There were a lot of them. But I think what made this book the most enjoyable for me was I listened to this book as an audiobook. Now, I loved the voice actors in this book. Now, if you've been watching my videos since the beginning, you know that I have some feelings about audio reading, and all audiobooks that walk into the same issue: accents, specifically accents representing people within BIPOC communities. It can either be a hit or a miss, and I thought that the narrators of this book were amazing, specifically the actor who was the voice actor for Shaky. This book was filled with emotion. It's a YA novel, so you've got all the highs and the lows. You've got teenagers experiencing all the feels. But I thought that she did this in a way that felt realistic and authentic, while also proving true to a historical fiction lens. This is a book that explores heavy themes, but does so in a way that doesn't hit you over the head about trying to teach you a lesson. The lesson is taught, but in a way that is heavily engrossing and beautiful, and also just, it's an important story to tell. And it is done so in a way that is thoughtful and is just a beautiful book. I will say that I left this book crying. It was just such a moving and beautiful experience to read. I would advise you, if you are somebody who cries easily, to not listen to this book while driving a vehicle. It will make you be a dangerous driver for everyone else around you. Not speaking from personal experience at all, but there were definitely certain chapters of the book where I was like, I might need to pull over to the side of the road. This is getting kind of sad. So those were the pros. If you are somebody who wants to learn more about that specific period of time and how the Japanese American community was affected and still is affected today by these centers, then I heavily recommend that you pick this book up. There are so many books that are out there that focus on this point in history as well, and here are a couple more recommendations that I would give to you if you are looking to learn more about mass incarceration camps. So one is the book by George Takei. It is a graphic novel memoir that is called They Called Us Enemy. It reflects his family's journey into these centers and the impacts that they have. And then a book that was published a couple years ago, which is a picture book, but also has a really important author's note published in the beginning of the book. It's called Love in the Library, which is a book that is inspired by the love story of the author's grandparents and how they met in a mass incarceration camp, and both were working in the camp's library. It is a book about literature and the power of literature and how literature can be used as a tool to kind of uplift. We Are Not Free is a book that is an important book that talks about really important period of time in history that we shouldn't forget. And there are so many authors that are also telling these important stories. Now, I've only given a couple of recommendations, so if you have more, you can feel free and drop them in the comments below. This has been my review for the week. This has been Dog-Eared Musings. Happy reading.